Welcome back, everyone, to another installment of our look at some of the most fascinating photographs from history. Photos maybe you have seen before, maybe you haven't, but I thought this has been an interesting series. If you haven't seen the other episodes in which I've looked at such photographs, there are links down in the description. I'll also put up a link at the end of this video so you can check out some of those. They're all in one playlist. But first one we're going to take a look at here. This is a photo, and I've actually got some description of this one that I'll read for you. It's a photograph taken on June 11th, 1905 in Oklahoma. And the man behind the wheel of this automobile is none other than Geronimo. It says it was taken at the Miller Brothers 101 Ranch in Oklahoma, southwest of Ponca City, Oklahoma. The car is a locomobile, and the Native American in full headdress to Geronimo's left is Edward LeClaire Sr. It says Geronimo so admired LeClaire's beaded vest that it was presented to him later in the day. This is 4 years before Geronimo died, and he was actually buried in that beaded vest. There are actually several other photographs taken of Geronimo that day. He was actually still imprisoned at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and the guards accompanied him during the day when these photos were taken. This particular photograph seems like any other at first until you know the story and what's involved here. This is the capture of a downed American Navy pilot during the Vietnam War. He's in the water. These guys are swimming out to him, and they're grabbing him here. And that young Navy pilot is future U.S. Senator and presidential candidate John McCain. Now, technically, his name he went by was John McCain III, though it should have been John McCain IV, because his grandfather, John McCain I, was actually the son of another guy that had the exact first, middle, and last name, John Sidney McCain. It's an incredible family. I was digging into it a little bit, and I think a lot of people know that Senator McCain's grandfather was a Navy admiral, and his father was a four-star admiral in the Navy who was one of the highest-ranking officers in the Navy in the Vietnam theater. But the family legacy goes far beyond that. I was looking through it a little bit, and Senator McCain had a number of uncles going back a couple generations who were like high-ranking officers in the U.S. Army. One of them was Adjutant General of the Army. He had a great-great-grandfather who was a private in the Confederate Army. And there's just a number of other officers in there. And his son also attended the U.S. Navy Academy, John McCain IV. A lot of history there. And, of course, we're very familiar with John McCain spending several years in prison in Vietnam. But this is the moment of his actual capture. Now, speaking of the McCain family, somewhere in this photograph is Senator McCain's grandfather, who at the time was an ensign, John McCain Sr. He is somewhere in this photograph listening to President Theodore Roosevelt. This is taken in 1909. He's standing, this is just before Roosevelt left office, and he's standing on one of the turrets of the USS Connecticut addressing some dignitaries here, but also, boy, that guy looks a little bit like Woodrow Wilson, but I know it's not who that is. But you can see here some higher-ranking officers as well as a number of sailors crowding around to listen to President Roosevelt speak. Pretty cool photograph there. This one's pretty fascinating. It was taken in 1971 in England, and it shows a group of teenagers. Could be just like any other photograph, except on the right is a 14-year-old Osama bin Laden. He attended an English language course in Oxford. I've been trying to do some digging on this, and I can't find any definitive explanation as to whether he was attending somewhere in Oxford or if he was actually attending Oxford University. All the sources I see just say that he attended a school in Oxford. Being 14, I'm guessing it might not have been Oxford University, but it is said from documents that have been found by intelligence that this is when he really started to develop a real disdain for Western culture was in his time in the UK studying English. He also was fascinated studying the works of people like Charles de Gaulle and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. And it said that he was quite the soccer player. He played center forward and was a big fan of Arsenal in his time in the UK. So interesting stuff. This one here was taken in 1946, October 24th, 1946 to be exact, and it is the first photograph ever taken from space. This is just after World War II ended. This is a decade before the first satellite was launched into orbit. American scientists and researchers in New Mexico got this photograph when they launched a V-2 rocket carrying a 35 millimeter motion picture camera from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. These were taken at an altitude of 65 miles, just above the accepted beginning of outer space. The film survived the crash landing because it was encased in a steel cassette. Fascinating. This one here has been recommended to me a few times, and some of you may have seen it. These are German soldiers being shown footage of the Holocaust. Listen, I'm not here to debate this kind of stuff, but I think it's fair to say that your average member of the Wehrmacht, the German army, had no clue that this stuff was going on. Plenty did, and there's no denying that. But imagine being a German teenager conscripted to fight for the German army. You survive the war, and then you find out that this is what you were defending. Overwhelming stuff. There probably were a lot of Germans who had no clue this was happening. This one's really cool. And actually has a guy from my local area in it here. This is a photograph showing, let's see, we've got Henry Ford right here, Thomas Edison right there, President Warren G. Harding here, and then our Northeast Ohio's own Harvey Firestone there on the right, sitting in front of a cabin. I don't know the context or the time frame for this photograph, just who the men are that are in it. And it looks like Thomas Edison's reading the newspaper. By 1944, it started to become clear that the Allies were going to win the war in Europe. And so some of the focus began to shift toward what do we do about these leaders in Germany that we're going to need to round up. And so there was a concern that people like the man you see in the picture were going to get away. And so there were things like this. This one is in the Free Press Weekly Prairie Farmer. And it shows you, it's from November 1944, and it shows you him au natural, and then other ways he might look in case, would you know his face if he settled in Western Canada? Maybe a chef, a professor, or just a hobo, or the guy next door. Now, this is not the only photograph like this. I'll show you another one. These ones, I believe, were actually done up by the U.S. government. And again, they show, hey, what if he grew out the mustache and changed his hair? What if he had glasses? What if he shaved everything off and was bald? What if he had a beard? Fascinating stuff, as the U.S. was just kind of anticipating what could happen. Nothing to see here, just a couple of revolutionaries chilling on a boat, fishing. We got Fidel Castro on the left and the very recognizable Che Guevara on the right. Really, really interesting one. Probably taken in Cuba. That guy's got a shirt that says Cuba on it right there. A lot has been said about inflation in post-World War I Germany and how worthless their currency became. And this is a prime example of that. You see kids in the 1920s in Germany playing with stacks of money as toys, because that's about how much they were worth. Just imagine what that money could have purchased just a few years earlier. There are a lot of candid photographs out there of the Romanov family in the years leading up to their deaths at the end of the Great War. But this one I thought was pretty cool. That is Tsar Nicholas II himself up on top. And down in front is his daughter, Anastasia. There are a number of pictures like this. I'll show you just a couple others. A lot of people claim this one is a selfie that Tsar Nicholas took, but it's probably an accidental photograph as he was checking the camera. He was probably trying to set it up for a photo, and you see him looking kind of at the camera as it's happening. But just really, there's so many of these. I encourage you just to look for candid Romanov photos. There's a lot of really cool pictures of this family. So this one comes from season 2 of the TV show Star Trek Voyager. And it's a kind of a cameo appearance by then Prince, now King Abdullah II of Jordan. Apparently he's a big fan of Star Trek, and I'm reading about this. It says that his cameo was arranged as a surprise for him by his U.S. advisor. The prince, who at the time of the cameo was 34 years old, said, "I would have been thrilled just to visit the set, but this is too much." After being put into makeup, given pointed sideburns, and then fitted for his uniform as a lieutenant of the Sciences Division, he rehearsed and shot this scene, which is the episode called Investigations from season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. He wasn't given any spoken lines because he's not a member of the Screen Actors Guild. It says afterwards he was crowded by well-wishers, and everybody just thought it was really, really neat. I've seen this one several times, and I've hesitated to share it in the past because I know that a lot of photos that purport to show World War I combat scenes are not, and they're recreations from later. So I haven't been able to confirm 100% the authenticity of this photograph, but it seems to be pretty genuine. It doesn't necessarily mean that this man was under combat at this moment, but this is a Scottish piper standing. You can see there, he's obviously on a World War I battlefield. You can see the barrenness of the landscape, which pretty much always indicates the World War I battlefields when you couple that with trenches and barbed wire in that way. Over 1,000 Scottish pipers were killed during the First World War. They were there to provide morale, to give a boost to the men, and to help them to fight better. And so they were an obvious target then for the German forces, who didn't want the other side to be able to fight better. And so I always thought that regardless of the context of this photo, knowing what we know about the importance of pipers on the Western Front and how many of them died in duty in the service of their country, I just thought this was a powerful photograph. This may be the last photo ever taken of Vladimir Lenin. It was taken after he'd had several strokes, and by this point he was mute and unable to speak. We've seen a few photographs of historical figures late in life before, and it's always interesting to be reminded of the mortality of even the most powerful and influential members of our history, that we all end up in the same place. We all end up dead at the end of this life. Some of us die young, some die old, but we all eventually die. This one's one of a number of photographs taken in Berlin in 1945, and this is inside the Reichstag. And it's graffiti. A lot of it is people writing their names. But this is all graffiti written by Soviet soldiers after they had fought really hard and taken Berlin, taken the Reichstag, and wanted to leave their names behind. A lot of women went to factories to work during World War II. We have that famous Rosie the Riveter sign that was made, that image, and it was necessary because so many men, well over 10 million men, something like I think 16 million men ended up in uniform in the United States. But this particular photograph of this woman working at a factory during World War II in Van Nuys, California is particularly interesting because that is the future actress Marilyn Monroe working at her factory. This is a tough one to look at, but I think it's important. This is a baby crying in the remains of Shanghai in the beginning stages of the war between Japan and China, which some people mark as the real start of World War II. But just very, very sad to look at. And I don't know the context of it. I just know that it was Shanghai 1937. This is a really cool picture. It's taken off the coast of Ireland during a fight between the Navy and the German U-boat 175. U-175, you can see here that they're launching depth charges on it. U-175 had sunk 10 merchant ships during its service record at that point. And at one point during this fight between the Navy and U-175, there was a friendly fire incident where one of the merchant ships was firing at the sub and killed some of the members of the crew on one of the Navy ships. But eventually U-175 was destroyed. It actually had to surface because some of the damage from the depth charges caused a poisonous gas leak aboard the vessel, and it surfaced, and about 80% of the crew actually survived and were rescued. When it surfaced, the U.S. Navy actually boarded this submarine and started searching, trying to find prisoners, trying to find any documents, things like that they might confiscate, but the sub started sinking, and they had to hurry up and get off, so they weren't able to recover anything. I've always loved this one, and we'll wrap it up with this one here. This is taken in 1893, and these are the survivors of the freshman-sophomore snowball fight at Princeton in New Jersey. It looks like it was more like ice balls, but it was pretty brutal. Just look at how messed up these guys' faces are from this snowball fight. Really crazy stuff. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I'll throw up links to some of the other videos I've done on this topic, as well as links in the description. Please check them out. And if you like what you see and you want to see more, let me know in the comment section. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much.